Good evening. I'm Dr. Jikku Susan. So we can start our session. And today's session is on human resource planning, or otherwise we can also call it as manpower planning. So we can have a quick look on what exactly is human resource planning. So human resource planning is one of the earliest initiatives of the human resource department of any organizations, and basically, or mostly, almost all the organization, the human resource planning is initiated based on the objectives of the organization. So, or we can try to understand it in a little more detail. Human resource planning is based on, or human resource planning is initiated based on the objectives of the organization, or human resource planning is a strategy which organization adopts so that they can eventually meet their ultimate objectives or goals. So the next question is how often human resource planning is done. So it depends on the organization. So every organization will have an annual human resource planning process where the organizations will be anticipating the kind of projects they may have in the future probably for the next 1 year. And also the projects which are in pipeline, and they can have the probability, which they'll have the probability of getting it in the future based on all these requirements. And along with that, along with the projects which they are having in hand, the projects which they are anticipating in the future, or the projects which are in pipeline or in discussion. And along with that, they will also take into consideration the probable number of people that can leave the organization in that one year, or we can call it as the employee turnover, which is expected in that year. So all these factors together are taken into consideration when an organization goes for human resource planning to make it better effective. So if you look at the chart here, or if you look at the diagram here, you will understand effective human resource planning involves finding out the right people. So who is a right person for a job? So when we, this concept, we will try to understand in terms of competency. So if you try to understand what exactly is competency, competency is the ability or the eligibility and ability of a person to perform a particular task. For example, someone who is extremely good with numbers, who is good at dealing with all the financial requirements and statements of the organization, we can say that he is competent for that job. So if you ask this person, or if you change his department, or if you change his functional area and put him in sales, he may fail terribly because that is not his competency. So competency is very specific, and it changes from individuals to individuals. People who are competent in one area, it is not mandatory that they will be competent in another job and another functional area. So people who have the right competency to perform that job is called as the right people. Right people and right capabilities. These two will go hand in hand. And the right time. So it is important for the organizations to get the right people at the right time. For example, if I have a requirement now and I fail to identify the right people with right capabilities now. For example, if the production department in my organization is giving a requirement to me, who is the HR department, who is expected to meet the requirements of, or expected to meet the manpower requirements of all the other departments in my organization, whenever they give me the requirements, it comes with a deadline. So it comes with a deadline in the sense, imagine my production department needs a person who is good at quality checking, or they need a quality engineer. the present person or the present quality engineer is planning to leave, and he is planning to leave in a period of 1 month, and he is in his notice period, or he is planning to submit his resignation, and for the next 1 month he will be in his notice period. So the time which I get, or the timeline which I get from the production department to find a quality engineer, will be a maximum of 1 month. So I am even sometimes the production department may not give me the time, the luxury of having 1 month in hand. They may ask me to give a person in, say, 3 weeks, so that before the old person who is in the system now exits, I can hire the new person, and at least for a period of 1 week, there can be on-the-job training, and knowledge transfer from the person who is already in the system to the person who is newly inducted to the system. So what I am trying to make you understand is, the person, whenever a requirement comes from any department, it comes with a very tight deadline. And I am supposed to bound by the requirements of the departments and provide them people according to the timeline which they have given me. So that is the right time. For example, I fail to find out the right person in a month's period, or I find it difficult to find a person in the 3 weeks time, which is allotted for me, or which is given to me as the deadline. Then what happens is, I may be getting a person after, say, 2 months. What happens is, the person who was already existing in the system exited, and the new person joins after another month. So there was a huge gap of 1 month between the time the person exited and the time the new person joined. And that is not the only concern which happens here. Another issue is, there was no knowledge transfer which actually happened between the person who exited and the person who joined new. So these normally happens, and if the knowledge transfer doesn't happen as we planned, the new person who enters the organization, or the new employee who is inducted to the organization, takes more time to get adjusted and to understand the system and the culture of the organization, because he loses the hand-holding which he was supposed to get if he was inducted on time. I hope you understood what exactly is the importance of right time, and it is the right place. So we should get the right kind of people with the required capabilities which are expected, or which are required to perform that job at the right time and at the right place. So when we take into consideration the kind of people with whom we are inducting, we should also understand that we have to take into consideration a lot of factors. Someone who was having hands-on experience on certain technical areas, or who is having a technical expertise, if he is moved to some other functional area, and if he is moved to a different location, then the time the person takes to get adjusted is multiplied, or we can say it is into 2, because he has to get adjusted in 2 things. One is the new domain in which he is inducted, or to which he is inducted, and the new place where he is moving. So we have to get the right people who has the right capabilities at the right time, and we should also get them to the right place, or at the right place. So these are the basic. We want our human resource planning process to be very effective, these are certain factors which we need to take into consideration. So if we look at the definition of human resource planning, we will understand this is the process of analyzing and identifying the need for availability of human resources, so that the organization can meet its objectives. So this is where we started our discussion with. Every activity which happens in an organization is anchored towards meeting the objectives of the organization. So when we we dissect the organization's objective, we understand what kind of people are required, what kind of capacities are required, what kind of capabilities are required, what kind of competencies are required, and we dissect and we divide the competencies and try to find out people who can meet this competency requirements so that eventually the objectives of the organization is met. So this is how this flow chart gives us an understanding of how human resource planning process happens. We will look a little bit deep into this. So first is reviewing the organizational objectives and strategies. So different organizations, as we know, different business organizations will have different kinds of objectives. Some people will be focused on profit making, profit maximization. Others will be focused on providing best quality products to the customers. On some other organizations will be focusing on improving or contributing towards the betterment of the society, and different organizations will have different objectives, and based on their ultimate objectives, their strategies will be formulated. So, and when we think about the manpower planning, so we take two factors into consideration. One is we first scan the external environment for labor supply changes. For example, what is external environment? This is the labor market which exists outside the organization, or we can say that the open marketplace which exists outside the organization. For example, if we look at what is happening in the labor market now, we can say that labor market is slightly down. It is not because there are no eligible candidates. It is because most of the organizations are on a hire freeze mode. So that is the reason. If we look at the kind of recruitment and hiring process which is happening, this is not at a pace which is as expected after a pandemic. So we have to understand. So now in this kind of a situation, what happens is there will be a lot of people awaiting opportunities for them to work, and the kind of requirements which the organizations have will be less. So there will be a gap in the demand and supply. Supply is nothing but, supply is the number of people who are eligible, who are competent enough, and who are waiting in the open marketplace outside the organization to get opportunities to work with the organization. That is the supply. And demand is the requirement which the organizations have. So when we look at the present situation where I told most of the organizations are on a cost-cutting mode because of the various external environmental factors like the economic slowdown which is happening, which is eventually leading to organizations moving towards cost-cutting, reducing the manpower which they have, thinking of a hiring freeze, moving towards a hiring freeze. When all these things happen, there will be huge supply which is there in the marketplace and less demand. So when there is huge supply of manpower resources available in the market, and when there is less supply or less demand, then there is always a probability, or we can say that the organizations have competitive advantage because they will get best resources for lesser price. That is one thing. And next is assessing the internal workforce. So before we go for recruitment, or before we go for hiring, another factor which we need to take into consideration, or we can say that one of the most important factors which we need to take into consideration is to assess the internal workforce. We need to understand how many people are already existing in the organization. So, and after that, we can decide whether we should go for a hire or no hire decision from the external labor market. For example, like how we discussed, when the organizations are going on a cost reducing or cost cutting mode, so first they will try to adjust with the labor or the workforce which are already available with them. If they find that they have some excess employees who are already existing, who are already there with the system, then they will go with the move forward with the decision of no hire. First thing which organizations do is they will try to reallocate the excessive employees which are available in the organization to other departments or other functional areas where their competencies match. Or if nothing of that sort is practically possible, the last resort, that is what we should understand, the last resort of any organizations will be to lay off their employees. But laying off the employees who are already there with the system is not the first option, and it is not even the second option. So it is the last options where, or last option which organizations will plan for whenever they go for manpower planning. So that is assessing the internal workforce. So based on this assessment, first we will assess how many number of employees are available in the organization. If there is, and we try to find out the gap between the supply and the demand. So for example, if we take an example into consideration, so you are anticipating a new project probably after 3 months, and in the pipeline the discussion is going on, and you need 150 total employees so that the new project can be functioned in with ease, and you have 100 employees existing with you now, then there is a gap of 50 employees. You have 100 employees, that is the internal workforce which is already available with the organization, and because of the new project which you are anticipating to get, you need another 50 employees. So there is a gap of 50. It is easy because this is a positive gap, which we can say that you are not cutting on anybody's job. You have lesser manpower supply and you need more manpower. So we always can go for external recruitment sources for recruitment. So there is another gap. That is, you have 150 employees and certain projects are already at the deadline, and in probably in a month or two, you will be handing over certain projects to the clients, and after which you need only very less number of people for the regular maintenance of that, and you have 150 employees now, and later on, after these projects are handed over to the clients, you may need only 100 employees. Then also you have a gap. Here also the gap is 50, but here there is a difference in the nature of the gap. Here the gap is like we can say that the manpower is in excess. So we will have to find out ways on how to manage with this excess manpower, whether we can reallocate these resources to some other functional areas if there is some requirements, or eventually we may have to go for a hiring freeze and then think about laying off the employees. So based on all these assessments, we will go for forecasting methods and identify organizational need for people. So if we have excess number of employees available in the organization, what we will do? If we need people, we have lesser number of people available with the organization, what we will do? So these are the gaps, and we will identify the gaps and we will formulate strategies and plans to work out on how to meet the gap or how to bridge the gap. So if you have lesser number of employees available with the organization and you need to go for hiring so that your organization functions will not be affected, that is comparatively an easier decision, because of course it involves cost, but when we think about it from an emotional purview of an organization or an HR, so you are not you're not asking any of the employees to leave the organization. You are not laying off any employees. Rather, you are trying to give hope and opportunities for prospective employees who are waiting in the job market in search of better prospects. One of the difficult decisions which HR people come to face is when you have excess people and you don't know what to do with them, and even your eventual decision is to lay them off. So these two activities, both of these activities or both of these plans will come under the general HR planning process. We will have a quick look at why organizations go for effective human resource planning, or is it required? So in the absence of effective human resource planning, sometimes organizations may not have required number of competent people, or sometimes organizations will have excess number of employees, which will eventually increase the cost of the organization. And even when there are excess employees in the organization, that will also result in other employees not having sufficient quantity of work, which will lead to a lot of organizational politics and other internal issues which may happen. So benefits of HR planning is, one is lower HR cost. When you know that you need this many number of people and you have the exact number of people, that will reduce your HR cost, because you are not paying anything excess for employees who are over and above your requirements. So more timely recruitment. So human resource planning, as in the beginning we discussed, as we discussed in the beginning of the session, like normally HR departments floats a chart for the entire financial year, which starts from April and ends in March. So normally if we try to understand how this hiring happens, for example, monthly I may have some requirements based on the number of employees who leave the organizations. So how will I predict this? So every month, for example, on an average, I may have to hire 2 people or 3 people or hundreds of people. How do I decide this? I decide based on the data which is available with me, and that data will be on how many employees left the organization in the previous years during that period. So I make a data analysis based on the data which is available to me with the organization, and I will decide, or I will come to a conclusion, I will come to a probable conclusion, come to a probability that this many number of employees may leave the organization in this period of time. So, for example, if we take the month of April, May, June, July, definitely there will be requirements, regular requirements based on the calculations which I have made. Imagine in the month of June, you're going to get a project, and there are discussions which are going on. Your project is in the pipeline, and the understanding between you and your client is the project will start getting executed in the month of from the month of June. So in the month of June, you may have to hire. So you may need, for example, we can say that you may need another 100 employees on board so that you can start executing the project from the month of June. So when do you start planning? So all of a sudden, if you think that I will get 100 employees in the month of June, I will start the process in the month of May, it may not happen. So we may start planning for that much earlier in advance. For example, we can say that we might have started the process in the month of February itself, but we will wait. We will do all the background work, make it very clear, and everything is ready. And we will be waiting for the month of April when we will get the budget for that particular year. And the moment we get the budget, we will start executing the manpower requirement process. Like we will start announcing the openings to the public. Like we may be giving advertisements. We might have shortlisted the media, in whichever media this advertisement should be given to the market. All those things will be decided in advance, and the moment we get the budget, advertisements will be released. So this is how we plan and execute things in advance, so that we will not have deficiency of people at the time of executing a project. So more inclusion of protected groups. So whenever we go for hiring, we understand that diversity and inclusion are the mantras which are followed these days, and we are not supposed to omit people from any ethnical or cultural background. So we are not, most of the organizations these days project themselves as equal opportunity employers. Equal opportunity employers means if an employee is capable of performing his or her assigned task, irrespective of what all physical issues or physical issues are existing for that employee, if they are able to execute the jobs which is assigned to them, then they should be given an opportunity by the organization. So that is called as inclusion of protected groups. And better talent management. So if we look at the human resource planning process, we understand that this is like a tip of an iceberg. So you plan for human resource requirements, you identify the right kind of people, you give advertisements, you identify the right kind of people, you select people, your employees may join your organization. Your real challenge starts after that. That is how you manage better talent management. So this is one of the difficult issues which organizations face from time to time. Now, scanning the external environment, this we discussed a little bit. We will try to understand it in detail. So environmental scanning is a process of studying the environment of the organization to pinpoint opportunities and threats. So whenever you look at an organization, we have both the types of environment, that is the external environment, which exists outside the organization and where we don't have any kind of control. So, like, for example, environmental changes impacting human resources, or if you look at these factors, you will understand that there are government influences. When government changes its policies, when government comes out with new rules and regulations, new conditions put forward. So these things, we will not have any role. We will not have any say on all those things. So government lays down rules and we are bound to follow that. The economic conditions which are prevailing in the market. So as we already discussed, whenever there is an economic slowdown, so obviously there will be the impact of all these things on the human resources available and human resource requirements. Geographic and competitive concerns. So for example, the geographical location of your organization and the kind of competitors you have both have equal influences on the kind of people you get. For example, if your competitor is a paymaster, but you are not in a position to compete with your competitor in terms of the pay which is offered to your employees, then the kind of the employees, or we can say the quality of the employees you get may be much lower compared to the quality of the employees your competitor gets, because best employees will normally get what they demand for, and they look for organizations who can meet their requirements. Then geographical location of the organization is also a major concern, because if you look at what is happening in the market nowadays, most of the employees these days are not interested to actually go to their office and work. They are interested to work from home. So when this work from home modality was introduced, all of a sudden, full-fledged work from home modality was introduced all of a sudden during that pandemic period. So there was a lot of reluctance. People were not actually interested to work from home because they felt like their world crashed down. They didn't have any places to go, and I know they couldn't meet their gossips, their colleagues. There was no grapevine communication which was happening, between the colleagues. There was no fun time. There was no change in the environment because of a lot of things. Employees were not actually very happy when the work from home modality was introduced. Gradually or eventually, people got used to the comfort of being at their home and working. They didn't have to face the traffic issues. There was a lot of cost saving because you were not moving out. And eventually, people got very much adjusted to this work from home modality. And nowadays, one of the major challenges which HR department faces in totality is to mobilize people to organizations. There were even communication that happened from the organization to the employees stating that if you're not interested to come back to the office, you can better leave the organization. So these are a few challenges which organizations and employees are facing these days. And when you go for hiring new employees, HR departments are forced to check their interest of whether they are interested to come to the office and work, or they would like to stay back at their home and work. And next is workforce composition. How are you bringing in diversity to your workforce? That is your workforce composition. Now, this is what we discussed about the external environment. Now we will look at the internal workforce. How do we assess the internal workforce? So we normally do the jobs and skills audit. In this, we will try to understand what kind of jobs are existing in the organization and what kinds of skill sets are required for performing these tasks. For example, there is a terminology called job evaluation, where the organization will try to understand the value that particular job adds to the organization. So if you look at what happens around us in the market, so some organizations eventually kill certain jobs once they realize after a job evaluation that unlike earlier days, these particular jobs are not adding any kind of value to the organization. So such jobs will be killed. Or instead of those jobs, the jobs which are newly coming up, where artificial intelligence is used and which will eventually improve the productivity, or the kind of other new jobs which are coming up will be inducted to the organization, and jobs which are not adding value to the organization will be killed by the organization itself. And that is also one reason why people who are not updating themselves on a regular basis according to the changes in the market will eventually lose their jobs, because the moment organization realizes that these employees and their skill sets and the jobs which they are performing are not adding value to the organization, they are no more required. So organizational capabilities in inventory. Organizations normally has a human resource information system database. So this is a source of information about employees' knowledge, skills, and abilities. We call it as KSA. So for every job, we will look into the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the employees. See whether this KSAs are contributing to the betterment of the organization. So this is when, if we realize that the knowledge, skills, and abilities these particular employees possess are not adding value to the organization, then those employees may not be required in the future. Next is components of an organizational capabilities inventory: individual employee demographics, individual employee career progression, and individual employees' job performance data. So organization will have details of every employee. We call it as an employee's service book or an employee's personal file, where from the day an employee joins the organization, every feather which he adds to his hat as long as he is in the organization, every disciplinary action he faces, everything will be recorded in his personal file or in his service book. So if an employee gets promoted or if he is appreciated for certain things, that will also go to his personal file. Now, we will look at how HR supply, human resources supply and demand are forecasted. So forecasting is the use of information from the past and present to identify expected future conditions. So this is where there is a lot of discussion going on about how data analytics will be the play master in the future, like how data analytics is sinking into all the systems now, and what are the benefits organizations are reaping out of the very very effective data analysis and all those things. So if you look at this forecasting, this is the use of information from the past and present. So you can say that we dig the data which is available, the past data which is available with us, and the present data which is available with us, and we analyze both the past and the present data to expect or to anticipate, or we can say to predict the future conditions. So that is the reason we say that data analytics is a method in which we use the data which is already available with us, which is the past data, to predict the future. So based on the trends which we observe in the past and present data, we will be able to draw a trend for the future. So we have forecasting periods. We have short-term forecasting periods where the prediction will be made for less than 1 year. And we also have intermediate and long-range forecasting periods where the prediction will be made for up to 5 years. And for long range, it is for more than 5 years. So what we should understand is, to make the predictions accurate, to make the predictions better accurate, the quality of data which we use for prediction should be, the quality of the data which we use for predicting should be good, so that the accuracy of predictions which we make for the future will be good. So now we have certain forecasting methods. First one is the easiest method, that is the judgmental method, where the estimates are based on the opinions of the managers, top down or bottom up. So if we look at any organization, if you look at a department of any organization, for example, you take sales department into consideration, there will be a manager, and he will be the most appropriate person to predict without using much of data analytics techniques, rather than based on his experience of how many people joined and how many people left in the previous years. He will be able to give you an estimate of how the turnover will be progressing in this year. That is asking managers' opinions. So rules of thumb is using general guidelines. Rules of thumb is like general guidelines. So if these many number of people exited the organization in this year, or we can say that there is a particular new organization coming into the market, and or we can say that an MNC is new, an MNC is establishing and its business in your area, they will start hiring, and you know that this company pays better than what you are paying, or better than whether your competitors are paying. So obviously there will be a huge movement of people towards the new organization. So these are rules of thumb. We know that these things will happen when your competitors pay better, when your competitors want to poach more employees, and people will eventually move. Delphi technique is asking a group of experts who have the expertise in the field to understand how many number of people may be required, how many number of people can leave in a certain period of time. So nominal groups is reaching a group consensus in open discussion. So normally how departments take decision. The departments take decision based on a group consensus. There will be department meetings, and where everybody will be given the opportunity to express their opinions, and based on everybody's opinion, a mutual consensus will be reached on. And those are judgmental methods. Now, we have mathematical methods. Also, we can call it as effective use of existing data, regression analysis, simulation models, productivity ratio, and staffing ratio. So regression analysis is when you use the past data to predict the future. So simulation models are we create anticipated situations. We recreate situations and try to understand what happens on how people react during that situation. And based on that, we will reach an analysis that if these kind of situation happen in real life, then this many number of people can exit the organization, or these many people can stay back with the organization and others can exit. Productivity ratio is a units produced per employee. So imagine if these many number of units are produced, say 10 units are produced per employee on a day. If the production requirement, for example, if there is a festival season, or a festival season is fast approaching, and obviously the demand rises, and you need every day you need some 500 pieces to be produced extra. So we will reach the productivity, we will take into consideration the productivity ratio to understand how many more number of people will be required to meet the increased demand. Staffing ratios is based on the estimates of indirect labor needs, like how we told. Suddenly there is somebody goes on leave, or somebody is on a sabbatical. So here people are not leaving the organization, but no, you may have to come out with some kind of adjustments to meet the requirement. So whenever there is a demand spike all of a sudden, for example, the moment rainy season starts, umbrellas will be required in huge numbers. So based on all these things, based on the demand increase in the like outside market, you may have to come out with a staffing ratio to understand that your customers' waiting time will not increase. The more you make your customers wait, there is lesser probability for you to retain your customers. Now we will look at forecasting the demand for human resources. We have organization-wide estimate for total demand. This is what we normally do on an yearly basis. We will try to understand how many people are required by each and every department in the organization. So once we try to understand the entire organization's requirement, then we will go to a unit breakdown. Unit breakdown for specific skill needs by number and type of employee. So we try to understand the organization needs, for example, 100 employees. Then we will try to understand how many employees each department needs and what is the kind of skill requirement. So how many, for example, how many number of accountants you need, how many number of say welders you need, how many number of mechanical engineers you need. So that is the skill requirement which each department needs. So based on this, we will develop decision rules. Like, for example, you had a project on which you you needed people who are good at managing tax. Imagine you were dealing with a client's tax requirements, and that project is over. The project is over. You handed over the project to your client. Now you have 5 employees exist, because the rest of the employees, there are 3-4 employees who you may be required for meeting the continuous clients queries of the clients, and you have excess employees. Now what we can do is we can try to understand whether these employees, these 5 employees who are now on bench, can be reinstated to some other projects or can be given to some other departments where their competency will match. So based on the decision rule, so imagine our requirement we realized is 100, and there are 5 employees who are already existing in the market who don't have any work as such now. So we can try to identify places for this 5 people so that the eventual requirement will reduce to 95. So develop additional decision rules for positions impacted by chain effects of internal promotions and transfers. So sometimes what happens when we go for, that is probably the second part, when we go for recruitment and selection, if you look at the cost of recruitment and selection, we understand that recruiting and selecting people at the lower levels is the cheapest. So if the organizations want to reduce cost further, what they can do is they can promote people who are already there with the system to the higher levels. So it is a chain reaction. It's a chain effect. A person who was a manager, who was an assistant manager, is promoted as a manager. Senior executive is promoted as assistant manager. An executive is promoted as a senior executive. A junior executive is promoted as an executive. Now, instead of hiring a manager straight away, we will be hiring a junior executive. So this has two benefits. One is your employees' morale is highly improved because they feel like they have opportunities for vertical growth in the organization. And the second thing is, instead of hiring a manager, hiring a junior executive is mostly cost effective, and also it saves a lot of time, because if you want to hire a manager, that may take time and energy, but if you are hiring an executive, resources will be easily available in the market. So that is what we discussed. So we have forecasting the supply for human resources. We have external supply and internal supply. That is what we already discussed. External supply is what is available in the market, and internal supply is what you have with the organization. So now if you look at the factors which affect the external HR supply, net migration for an area. So how many people are interested to actually migrate to an area? So if it is a very rural area where facilities are very less for the people to live in, for example, if people migrate to that area with their families and children, along with their families and children, people will always take into consideration the facilities, school facilities, college facilities, other living standards and all those things. So if those kind of facilities are less, people will be hesitant to move. If climatic conditions are not good, people will be hesitant to move. Individuals entering and leaving the workforce. And one more thing which people take into consideration is the number of employment opportunities which are available in a particular area. For example, if your organization is located in an area where many industries are not there or many industries are absent, for the possibilities of employees moving to another organization is comparatively less. People will think and n number of times before taking decisions to move to those areas. Individuals graduating from schools and colleges, that is for example, you need mechanical engineers and electronic engineers. So what is the proportion of people who are passing out every year? Whether you have sufficient, you will get sufficient number of resumes or sufficient number of profiles which you can be used, so that you can maintain the proportion of, or you can maintain the yield ratio, which will be discussed in the future classes. And changing workforce composition and pattern. So this is what we discussed. So inclusion and diversity and inclusion is becoming the talk of the town these days. And the pattern, this is what we discussed when we discussed about work from home pattern, hybrid work mode, where people are not very interested to actually come to the office and work. Economic forecast, the moment we listen about economic slowdown, economic meltdown, the first thing organizations do is they'll go for a hiring freeze. So technological developments and shifts, the technological developments is happening at a much, much faster pace than what was expected. So we can say that the expectations from the employees are also skyrocketing. Employees are all supposed to be very, very technologically savvy to keep abreast of the changing requirements and to ensure that they are still required in the job market. And actions of competing employers, this also we discussed. When you have too many competitors, Your employees will be at the competitive advantage. They will always have the competitive advantage to demand more from you. Government regulations and pressures and other circumstances affecting the workforce. So there are a lot of factors which affect the employees, or which affect the human resource requirements. So internal HR supply, so as we already discussed, so if you give promotions to your employees, so that will have that, or that will result in a morale boost, and people will feel like it is good to stay with the organization because they will provide me opportunities to learn. Another important thing which we should understand is the succession planning, how organization is planning the succession. So succession planning is a conscious effort which is undertaken by the organization to understand, like for example, a particular person who is now working as the CEO of our organization. For example, if his tenure is coming to an end in another 1 or 2 years, the organization will start searching for an alternative to decorate that position, so that this person who is identified for that role will also have an understanding, and he will also try to be in pace with what is happening with the organization as well as the external environment. So estimating internal labor supply for a given unit, we will try to understand this quickly. So we have current staffing level, we have projected outflows this year plus projected inflows and this year. And when we equate this, we will get the internal supply of the next year. So now we will try to understand the source of inflows. The inflows are, we hire from external sources, external job market. We have internal transfers, promotions, and recalls. Recalls is when you call your employees back. Probably the employees who retired from your organization are called back, or the employees who resigned from your organization are called back, or those who were laid off some time back will be called back. So all these things will come under the recall. And source of outflows is promotions. When people get promoted, they will reach the next level, and you will not be able to get the employees working at the same level for the same job description anymore. Turnover, when people leave. Termination can also be called as involuntary turnover, when the employee doesn't want to leave, but the organization doesn't need that employee anymore. Demotions, retirements, deaths, and layoffs. So these are the various sources because of which employees move out, and source of inflows are the reasons because of which employees move into the organization. So whenever there is outflows and inflows, it becomes the responsibility of the organization to match between the inflows and outflows, so that you will have the right number of people to execute the task at the right time. So now we will have a quick look at the issues in matching the supply of labor with the demand of labor. Succession planning, as we had already discussed, it is, if you look at the reasons for because of which organizations suffer, one of the major reasons is when they fail in their succession planning. Then managing human resource surplus. When you have excess people, how do you manage this excess people? See, whenever we have a shortage of people, it is comparatively easy because you can avoid a lot of emotional breakdown, and you can avoid a lot of resources being misused, because you can always go for hire. Outplacement services, how organizations look at opting for outplacement services to meet the requirements of the employees. HR planning in mergers and acquisitions is also a highly challenging task. So if your company is in the process of getting merged with any other companies, or you are getting acquired by some other organizations, then again, people will become an issue because it is the company which is acquiring may not need all the employees you have, or when you are merged, then obviously that both the companies will have its own share of employees, and you will not know whether you will need all the employees to be continued or not. So downsizing approaches, this involves, as I told you, a lot of emotional like breakdown also. When the employee leaves, it is okay. And when there is a voluntary turnover and employees leave by themselves, that is okay. And whenever organizations normally have excess number of employees, the first thing which they do is going for a hiring freeze. Recruitment process and selection process, the entire hiring process will come to a halt and we will wait for employees to leave by themselves. And even then, if we are not reaching the targeted numbers, we may go for a voluntary separation programs which will be offered for the employees. And this voluntary separation programs will mostly come with a lot of benefits for the employees. They will get some bulk amount which the organization offers them, and they can take that bulk amount and leave the organization. Then layoffs. Layoffs is when organizations don't find any other options other than sending their employees voluntarily and outplacement services. We also try to put our employees somewhere else, some other organization, so that they will have some jobs in hand. So these are like how we manage when you have excess employees and the organizations really want to reduce the number of employees. And this is all about manpower planning. We try to understand the definition of manpower planning, and we try to understand what are the methods and approaches of manpower planning. We understood that there exist two kinds of gaps in manpower planning. That is when you have excess number of employees in the organization, or you have shortage of employees in the organization. We also try to understand how organizations try to cope up with the gap, how they try to bridge the gap when they have excess employees and when they have shortage of employees. And we also had a quick look at the changing dynamics of the market, where HR professionals are actually taxed by the changing requirements of the people, where people are not interested to come to the organization and work. Rather, they opt for a hybrid work mode or a work from home modality, and how to frame HR policies and procedures to accommodate the changing requirements of the employees. And when employees move completely to a work from home modality, how do you ensure employee engagement? How do you keep your employees emotionally connected with the organization? These all are big challenges which human resource department faces these days. And even now, there are no concrete solutions which are laid on, because these are current issues which are still going on in the organizations, and the HR department and the organizations are as a whole are trying to figure out how to find solutions for these kind of issues. So I hope you understood. So if you have any doubts, you can ask.
No, it's very clear. We really understand. You are really explaining. We can understand everything that you are saying.
Did you understand?
Yes, you are explaining very well.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any doubts? So if you have any doubts, you can even put it in the chat box. I'll definitely share this slide, Emmanuel. So if you don't have any doubts, then we can wind up. I'll share the slides. You can go through the slides, and even after going through the slides, you can come back with your doubts. It's all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so shall we wind up?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can do.
Thank you so much.